Hello everyone, welcome to the live session 6 for modern Indian architecture. We will wait for 5-10 minutes for others to join and then we will start the session. We have waited for 5 minutes. We'll start with the session now. Others can join in between. So, hello everyone. I am Shreya Shukla. I am the course TA for NPTEL for this course, Modern Indian Architecture. The course instructor for this course is Professor Prabjot Singh Chani. He is a professor at IIT Roorkee. Today we will be doing the previous year assignments of week 6. I would just like to make it clear over here that we only do previous year assignment questions here. We do not do this year's question here. So today we will be doing week 6 previous year assignment questions. So the course outline, I mention it in every class for people who join for the first time in the lectures. So what is modern Indian architecture? What this course really means? Modern is a word which very simply means in English up to date. And modern Indian architecture, what this course means by that is the Indian architecture in today's time. This course covers the evolution of modern architecture in India from pre-independence to the present time, and the evolution will be seen through various modern trends and building technologies, covering many buildings over a span of nearly a century of many architects who have made a significant contribution in the development of modern Indian architecture. And then the study will conclude, this course will conclude with the study of 21st century Indian architecture, highlighting the several emerging concepts. This is the timeline that has been used in this course, study of modern Indian architecture from pre-independence to 21st century. So first few lectures covered Indo-Sasanic architecture, pre-independence part included Indo-Sasanic architecture, colonial architecture and Art Deco. And then post-independence periods, the start of modernism in India, revivalism, the impact of Western architects in India who came here and then designed a few great buildings. The first generation of Indian architects after our independence who studied in the West and came here and then implied their learnings here in Indian architecture. Then the role of CPWD, few of the buildings by CPWD, critical regionalism, post-liberalization, and then contemporary developments, environmental consciousness, and then search for a new architecture. So in week 6, the week 6 for course covered critical regionalism. So we will solve the question for week 6, which included critical regionalism. The objective of this course is to study the evolution of modern architecture in India with respect to structure, function and form, to look at the individual examples of iconic architects and understanding their design approaches, and to understand the various reasons and the various forces which impacted modern Indian architecture. Upcoming concepts such as energy efficiency, green building, seismic safety, etc. and the concept and ideas about various building typologies which students can directly apply in their design study. So week 6, the content covered in week 6 was completely about critical regionalism. 2 lectures were about introduction to critical regionalism and 3 lectures were about critical regionalism in Indian architecture with examples from the works of B.V. Doshi, Charles Correa, Uttam Jain, and we will be solving the questions based on that. So without any further ado, we will start with the session. So assignment 6, previous year, again making it clear that we only do previous year questions here, we do not do this year's question here. So starting with today's live session, assignment 6, question number 1. Critical regionalism refers to, Critical regionalism refers to a reimagine the material world to reflect the unity of all the arts, revival of medieval Gothic forms, an architecture rooted in modernism but tied to geographical and cultural context. Excuse me. Dramatic, exaggerated motion and clear and easily interpreted detailed. So, before answering the question, let's go in a little detail about what is critical regionalism. Critical regionalism is basically an approach to architecture which strives to counter the placelessness and lack of identity of the international style. With placelessness, what it means here with placelessness is that because of in globalization now and the emerging skyscrapers and the style of building and the international style of buildings specifically, all the buildings all around the world look same. They are made of similar materials, similar technologies, and there is no essence left in those buildings. They all look same. Most of the modern buildings, they look same. So if you take one building which has been built in one country and you place it in another country, nothing changes over it. It would function as the same because of the active cooling systems we have right now, AC, your air conditioning and heating and ventilation. This has been possible. So these buildings do not consider the geography or the climate in or culture in consideration, and these buildings have lost their identity because of which they have lost their identity. So that's why the term placelessness is being used here, in the sense that if you look at a building and you cannot determine where that building, which part of the plant that building actually will belong to, is which it means that it has lost its unique character, because the traditional architecture or the vernacular architecture of almost all the countries around the world, they have specific elements to their architecture which is very responsive to climate and the culture and the geography. But with the modern architecture of this time, contemporary times, that uniqueness has gone away somehow. So what critical regionalism does is that it is a new approach to architecture. It happened as a new approach to architecture which strived to counter the placelessness and lack of identity of the international style. And they also rejected the whimsical individualism and ornamentation of postmodern architecture. So what happened during when international style established around the world, then postmodernist architecture which started. Postmodernist architecture started as a counter to international style at that time because of this point only, the lack of identity. But the postmodern architecture, they used ornamentation from all the other eras and styles that happened, and they used those typical ornamentation styles along with modernist principles, which also critical regionalism rejected. So critical regionalism, what it does is that its roots are in modernism, but it does not follow the ornamentation and other things just for the sake of creating an identity or individualism. Rather, critical regionalism, it uses the principles of modernity but also includes the culture and geography in the context. They use local materials, they use local passive techniques, they use the elements that help in climate responsive architecture. So, stylings of critical regionalism seek to provide an architecture rooted in the modern tradition but tied to geographical and cultural context. Critical regionalism is not simply regionalism in the sense of vernacular architecture. Vernacular architecture is the architecture of people, in the sense that before there were architects, before there were builders, people used to construct their own houses. They figured out their own the materials, the techniques and everything. So that architecture is actually called vernacular architecture. So critical regionalism is not exactly vernacular architecture. It may take ideas and inspirations from vernacular architecture, but it is not exactly that. It's a progressive approach to design which seeks to mediate between the global and local languages of architecture. What it means here is global language in the sense that the modernist principles that are now there, which emphasize on the function of the building, and then the local language in the sense of using materials, the passive cooling techniques, and others. It is an architecture rooted in modernism but tied to geographical and cultural context. The phrase critical regionalism was first presented in 1981 in The Grid and the Pathway, an essay published in Architecture in Greece, with a slightly different meaning by the historian theorist Kenneth Frampton. Kenneth Frampton coined the phrase critical regionalism to define the elements of topography, climate, light, and tectonics fundamental to the art of building. These are equally important today also. Sri Lankan architect Minette de Silva was one of the pioneers in practicing this architectural style in the 1950s, and he coined the term regional modernism. So critical regionalism is also called regional modernism. Critical regionalism term was given by Kenneth Frampton, and regional modernism term was given by Sri Lankan architect Minette de Silva. So our answer is that critical regionalism refers to an architecture rooted in modernism but tied to geographical and cultural context. Moving to question number 2. The term critical regionalism was coined by Frey Otto, Kenneth Frampton, Gita Sarabhai, and Norman Foster. So we just learned that the term was coined by Kenneth Frampton. So I would just quickly talk about a little about Kenneth Frampton. So critical regionalism, like I just explained in the previous question, it is the styling of critical regionalism seeks to provide an architecture rooted in the modern tradition but tied to geographical and cultural context. It is a progressive approach to design that seeks to mediate between the global and the local languages of architecture. The phrase critical regionalism was presented in 1981 in the essay Grid and the Pathway by Kenneth Frampton. Kenneth Frampton coined the phrase critical regionalism, and it is used to define the elements of topography, climate, light, tectonics, which are fundamental to the art of construction, building, and architecture. Kenneth's full name is Kenneth Brian Frampton. He was born 20 November 1930. He is a British architect. He is still alive. He is 92 years old and he is still alive. He is a British architect, critic, and historian. He is regarded as one of the world's leading historians of modernist and contemporary architecture. He is an emeritus professor of architecture at the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation at Columbia University, New York, where he taught for over 50 years. He is a citizen of Britain and the United States. His most famous written work includes Towards a Critical Regionalism, 6 Points for an Architecture of Resistance, and another, Modern Architecture, A Critical History. So our answer is Kenneth Frampton. Moving to question number 3. Sites and Services Initiative, propagated in 1970s, was aimed at a riverfront development, vibrant design of sports villages, efforts to improve housing conditions, and iconic municipal architecture. So, sites and services. There have been numerous efforts to improve the housing conditions in India. The housing continues to remain one of the most critical and consistent problem in India since the independence and partition. After partition, India had to actually house so many refugees. There was a huge displacement, and so It was the time when public housing program in India started with the rehabilitation of refugees immediately after the independence. Many programs and many ways were tried to speed up the process of housing, especially for the low income group, uh, which are the economically weaker sections of our society. And one such initiative was sites and services. It was propagated in 1970s. So, what happens in sites and services initiative is basically land is provided, provision of plots of land, either on ownership or land lease tenure, with bare minimum essential infrastructure needed for habitable accommodation. So what happens in sites and services is that a land or a plot is provided to people on ownership or on land lease tenure, and bare minimum essential infrastructure, for example including toilets, including services of water and drainage and all those things. These bare minimum things are provided which help in habitable accommodation. So why this is done is so that people can build their own house in their own way according to their own wish. So as per the availability of their resources and as per their need. So because of which this whole scheme, the sites and services scheme, it views architecture as a system and a process rather than a finished structure or building, in the sense that in the case of sites and services program, it is not the finished product, it is not a building or a structure that is being given here, but instead it's a whole process in which bare minimum infrastructure facilities on a piece of land is given to people, and then they are expected to create their house over there with the time, with the resources they have and as per their need. Low income people in urban areas are given opportunity to build their own house as per the availability of resources. This was introduced because the conventional housing solutions were a failure. Because in many cases, when houses were built and then given to urban poor and these low income group people, it was a failure in a lot of terms. In a lot of cases, what they would do is that they would take the house from the government, but then they would lease it again and they would go back to living in the condition that they are used to living in. So it was not working. So this solution then was given, sites and services, where they are just given basic infrastructure services on a site and they are given the opportunity to create their own house according to their own wish. uh, because the conventional housing solutions in which the government was making houses and giving it to them was failing continuously. One of the examples are Arumbukam MMDA's social facilities. Arumbukam is a locality in Chennai in which social facilities like primary schools, clinics, etc. were provided, roads and service buildings and sites with sanitary code were provided, and then they built their own housing. Another example is the Aranya housing by B.B. Doshi. This plan, this image that is given here in this slide is actually the plan of Aranya housing. So, talking about sites and services, varying designs, because of this idea, varying designs come up as residents are responsible for their own house. So varying designs come up as per their need and the style they want to incorporate. And the style can be vernacular, will be vernacular because people are getting it constructed on their own, but they seek a modern solution for contemporary housing problem. The main principles of sites and services scheme or the programs is that the participation of the users in design and construction, participation of workers in entire decision making process, and multidisciplinary design consultants. If you can see the image on the left, so it's the same plot which has been shown in different phases. So in the first plot it has, and there's just a plot, and then in the second you see the sanitary facilities, third you see some extensions, in fourth slide you see and again another floor added, and then a part of first floor added, and then you see some extension happening, and then you see the whole second floor, so whole first floor being added, and then the whole second floor being added. So this is what happens in sites and service schemes, that with the availability of resources they have, and with the need they have, they keep constructing it over the years and turning it into something that they require. Aranya low housing, as I mentioned in the right now, was another example. Aranya low cost housing. This is the picture of Aranya low cost housing on the left, in which you can see the plots have. These are the plots, and you see the small structures that are there. These are the structures of toilet facilities. So and also water supply and sanitation facilities. The Aranya housing by B.V. Doshi, which was built in 1988, it aimed at EWS residents, economically weaker sections, or the low income residents, to uh, it was aimed at the low income residents, and what they gave in this scheme was simple plinth, service core with a latrine and a water tap or bath, an option of a built room like a kitchen, and all the plots were connected to water and electricity, and unconventional configuration of plots and public spaces was given. So our answer is Sites and Services Initiative, propagate in 1970s. It was aimed at to improve the housing conditions in India. Next, PMAY under the housing context refers to Pradhan Mantri Avsar Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Atal Yojana, or none of this. So some of you might be aware of the term PMAY. I'll just quickly talk about it. So it's called Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, PMAY. It's a credit-linked subsidy scheme by the Government of India to facilitate access to affordable housing for the low-cost and moderate income residents of the country. It was launched in 25 June 2015, and it envisaged a target of building 2 crore affordable houses by 31st March 2022. I'm not sure if this goal has been achieved or not yet. I'll have to check on that. It has two components, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, PMAYU, which is for the urban poor, and Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin, PMAYG and PMAYR for the rural poor. The former PMAYU is administered by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and PMAYG is administered by Ministry of Rural Development. This scheme converges with other schemes to ensure houses have a toilet, Saubhagya scheme for universal electricity connection, Ujjwala Yojana LPG connection, access to drinking water, and Jan Dhan banking facilities. So this scheme ensures that the people have all these schemes available to them along with Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. The features of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana are that the government will provide an interest subsidy of 6.5% for EWS and LIG, 4% for MIG and 3% for MIG2 on housing loans availed by beneficiaries for a period of 20 years under the credit linked subsidy scheme from the start of a loan. The house under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana would be constructed through a technology that is eco-friendly, while allotting ground floors in any housing scheme under PMAY. Preference will be given to differently abled and older persons. Differently abled is a term that we do not use anymore. The correct political term would be to use the word persons with disabilities, PWD. So our answer is PMAY under the housing context refers to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Question number 5. Sarabhai House, Ahmedabad and Maison Raoul, France are works of Le Corbusier, Louis Aigan, F.L. Wright, Mies van der Rohe. So, Maison Raoul are actually a pair of houses which is located in the Upper Market Paris suburb, and it was designed by Le Corbusier and built in 1954 to 56. They are amongst his most important post-war buildings, and they feature a rugged aesthetic of unpainted cast concrete, beton brut, and roughly detailed brickwork. So it's a pair of houses. It is two houses which was commissioned to Mr. Raoul and his son Michael. So they are two houses for this family. The construction of these vaulted houses signals a new trend in Le Corbusier's work, and the Maisons Raoul can be considered his first new brutalist work. There is a use of shallow concrete vault which is cast against a permanent framework of thin bricks. These bricks span served as permanent molds for the shell concrete vaults, cast in place on top of them, tied with transverse steel rods. The vaults bear on continuous concrete beams that extend the length of each house at every floor. These beams in turn transfer the weight to load-bearing brick walls and enclose the house on every side. So these are concrete vaults which are putting their weight on the concrete beams, and the concrete beams are transferring the weight to the load-bearing wall structures. And this is how the inside, the first image you see, that is how the inside of the Maisons Raoul look like. And these are few of the exterior pictures that I have added, how it looks like, and you can see from the exterior also that the house has used the concept of a vault in it. Now talking about Villa Sarabhai. Villa Sarabhai or Villa de Madame Manorama Sarabhai is a modernist villa located in Ahmedabad, India. It is designed by the French-Swiss architect Le Corbusier. It was built between 1951 and 1955. It was built with a stark interior, a typical Le Corbusier design principle. The villa is located on a verdant 20-acre park owned by Sarabhais. Corbusier decided on the vault as the villa's defining structure after taking into consideration the local climate, which is characterized by wide fluctuations of temperature and humidity. Ahmedabad has a very hot and dry climate, so they have wide fluctuations of temperature. The temperature gets really high in summers especially, and humidity. So he chose the vault in consideration of that, and the idea of using vaults in consideration of climate response was that the vaults create bays or long hallways which helps air pass through, uh, move through easily. Sarabhai House is a hybrid structure of concrete vaults which has been inspired from Maison Raoul and Brice Soleil from Chandigarh. So Sarabhai House is considered as the combination of two of the famous works of Le Corbusier. The the use of concrete vault has been inspired from Maison Raoul, and the use of Brice Soleil in the house has been inspired from his own work in Chandigarh, which both are well suited for hot climate and construction industry. Vaulted system, the use of vaults provides a control of internal climate. There is a rooftop garden in this building, which is also a very typical Le Corbusier aesthetic or Le Corbusier's style, the use of roof garden. even so much so that even when uh, he gave 5 points of architecture and designed Villa Savoy to display the 5 points of architecture, but when he designed Major Joule, which is completely different from the style and the ideas of the uh, 5 points of architecture or Villa Savoy. However, one of the common thing between Maison Raoul and Villa Savoy was the presence of roof gardens. So rooftop garden is something that he keeps in his works most of the times. So rooftop garden was given in this house also, Villa Sarabhai or Sarabhai house. It increases the thermal mass and it reduces heat gain. So because of adding rooftop garden, you can reduce the heat gain in the building, in the sense that if you're aware of it, amongst all the surfaces of a building or a house that is exposed to sun, ceiling takes most of the heat in. We get most of the heat from the ceiling. So if you give a layer of rooftop garden over it, it creates a gap between the direct sunlight and the surface, which reduces the heat gain via the ceiling. The vaulted interiors, easy flow of cool monsoon air through interior. So like I was explaining, because the vault has been used here, and vaults, these act like bays, it creates bays and a long hall structures, which allows easy flow of cool monsoon air. And then swimming pool and shaded verandas, and these parts are also given, which are good examples of passive cooling systems in this house. What are the similarities between Maison Raoul and Sarabhai house? The use of exposed brick and concrete, use of Catalan vault, structural system with bays, use of greenery, and use of primary colors in the interiors. So our answer is Le Corbusier. Sarabhai House, Ahmedabad, and Maison Raoul, both are works of Le Corbusier. Moving to question number 6. The design of University of Jodhpur by UC Jain is an example of modernist spatial organization with regional materials, deconstructive architecture, local hill architecture, or revivalism. So Uttam Chand Jain was born in 1934 in Melwada, Rajasthan. He completed his schooling at Jodhpur and he graduated in architecture with class 1 honors in 1958 at IIT Kharagpur, where he was a merit scholar throughout. The design philosophy of Uttam Jain included use of regional vernacular architecture. His style included the impact of Rajasthan because he belonged to Rajasthan. His buildings reflect heritage of a particular place. So his works specifically include the reflection of heritage in his work. University of Jodhpur, Jain Narayan Vyas University. It was formerly known as University of Jodhpur. Now it is called Jain Narayan Vyas University. It was established in 1962. There is a huge use of yellow sandstone, which is local to Rajasthan, in this building. It is planned with modernist principles of spatial organization. So the planning or the designing of the plan has been done with modernist principles, but the form and the structure of load bearing stone. So the planning is of modernist principles, but the construction and the structural technique has been used as a traditional technique of the load bearing stone construction. It is a cost effective design because there is a minimal use of cement and steel, and to counter hot dry climate, buildings constructed with double wall. So because it is built in Rajasthan, so the passive techniques, cooling techniques that have been used in the buildings includes the use of brise soleil, thick walls, double wall in the sense that there is one wall, then there is a gap, and then there is another wall to shade the first wall from the direct sunlight. University of Jodhpur campus. Building is made with golden colored sandstone with which the traditional buildings of Jodhpur have been constructed usually. Steel and cement are used only minimally in this cost effective design. Walls are of dressed masonry laid in lime mortar, standard 3.5-meter long stone slabs. The university buildings are widely spread all over the campus. Three buildings, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, the Central Lecture Theatre Cluster, and the campus canteen, stand out among them. The building is constructed with a double wall to counter the hot and desert climate of the desert. And the outer wall screens the sun and are rhythmic in pattern. Lecture theatre cluster is a small ziggurat-like structure mirroring the inclined seating in each of its four identical halls. The lecture theatre, because it's a stepped classroom, it's a modernist plan, it's a modernist approach. It's a stepped classroom, so it looks like a ziggurat from outside. Each is a simple rectangle in plan supported by two parallel walls along its longer axis. A stone pergola screens the central node at which all the four theatres emerge. Approach is through a ramp framed between two lecture theatres. The canteen comprises of shared kitchen and service areas with separate dining facilities for students and teachers. The staff area is a small mezzanine that overlooks the large student dining hall below. It is reached by an open staircase rising from the entrance court. And there is also the use of stone beam or stone pergola, if you can see in the image on the right. So our answer is the design of University of Jodhpur by UC Jain is an example of modernist spatial organization because he has used modernist principles in his design, for example, in his design and his planning, but he has constructed it with the help of regional materials, yellow sandstone beams, load-bearing construction of stone wall, others have been used. So our answer is A, modernist spatial organization with regional materials. Going to question number 7. Charles Correa based his architecture on the philosophy form follows climate, form follows climate, form follows function, form follows beauty, function follows material. Charles Mark Correa, he was born in 1930 and he died in 2015. He was an Indian architect and urban planner. He is credited with the creation of modern architecture in post-independent India. He was celebrated for his sensitivity to the needs of the urban poor and for his use of traditional methods and materials. He rejected the glass and steel approach of some postmodernist buildings and focused on designs deeply rooted in local cultures, climate responsive architecture, all the while providing modern structural solutions under his creative designs. His style was also focused on reintroducing outdoor spaces and terraces. So he was one of the pioneers who focused on the climate responsive architecture in India. He addressed the needs of the buildings as per the location and the climate. He always respected the contours in the design. If you have seen the examples of Jawahar Kala Kendra in Panjim, Goa, it is built on contours. If you have seen the example of Bharat Bhavan, he respected the topography of those areas and created his work in such a way that the topography was respected and it was mirrored. And yeah, in create was so he was the one who said this, that the form should follow climate. The climate should guide the shape of the form. So it was his terminology that he gave form follows climate. So what form follows climate really means is that in creating a sustainable architecture or a sustainable building, it is better to use the notion of form follows climate. Why so? Because this means the site's landform or the site's context, geographical context or the climatic context, it influences the building form together with the aspect and shelter. For example, in places with hot and dry climate, you need thicker walls, shorter height, while in and smaller openings. While in places which are very humid, for example like Kerala, you need bigger ceiling height so that the warm air can go out of the room. You need bigger fenestration so that the air can come in through because of to tackle the humidity. Similarly, in cold climates, you also again need small compact spaces so that you can keep the heat inside the room and it does not go out. And in places where it rains a lot, you have to have sloping roofs so that the water is not accumulated on your terrace. So all these aspects are because of the climate of a space. All these points emerge as a response to the climate or the geography of that place. So this is what he meant by when he said that form follows climate. So the answer is A, form follows climate. Last three questions. Question number 8. This building is an example of folded RCC plate structure. Uh, Sangat, Ahmedabad, Hindustan Liver Pavilion, New Delhi, MRF HQ headquarters Chennai, 72 screens Jaipur. So this is how these buildings look like. The first image is of Sangat. Sangat was designed by B.V. Doshi. Second picture is of Hindustan Liver Pavilion. It was designed by Charles Correa. Third is the MRF headquarters in Chennai. This was again designed by Charles Correa. Fourth are the images of 76 screens Jaipur, which is designed by Sanjay Puri Architects. So what are folded plates actually? So folded plates are assemblies of flat plates, usually made of concrete, connected together along their edges in such a way that the structural system is capable of carrying loads without the need for additional supporting beams along mutual edges. So what happens in folded plate structures is that there is a plate, concrete plate, and they are rigidly connected together along their edges, and it is connected in random shapes and random places. So it is collected along the edges in such a way that the structural system ends up carrying loads and it does not need any additional supporting beams along the mutual edges. So the edges are just connected like this. They don't need a beam to take their load. It is designed such that. And these both images are of the Hindustan Pavilion. This is a section of Hindustan Pavilion, Liver Pavilion in by Charles Correa in New Delhi, and this is one of the views of the building. So they have used random folded RCC plates which were joined in situ, which means they were joined together on the site itself, and there is encasing ramps in the building and platforms below which create huge cannons which set up convection currents of air through the fractured stainless spaces. So cannons, with cannons that they mean is, if you can see the image over here on the left, you see these uh, square openings that are coming out. These are the cannons that they're talking about. So the design with multi-level spaces, it helps in it leads to convection currents, and the building is cooled with the convection current ideology. It is inspired from his tube house, which was designed by Charles Correa only, and it uses the natural cooling principle as in the tube house. So the answer is, the building is an example of folded RCC plate structure is Hindustan Liver Pavilion. As you can see, uh, Sangat has use of vaults. It does not use plates, and the MRF headquarters use a big parasol or a pergola and pilotis and ribbon windows, but it does not use folded plates. And the building by Sanjay Puri, it uses concrete jali work, but does not use fold plates. So the answer is Hindustan Level Pavilion, Jaipur, New Delhi, sorry. Charles Correa applied the bungalow principles to Kanchenjunga Apartments, Mumbai, Kovalam Beach Resort, Kovalam, Jawahar Kala Kendra, Jaipur, Kala Academy, Panjim. So, Kanchenjunga Apartments, they are apartments located in Mumbai. The architect was Charles Correa. It was built in 1983. Kanchenjunga Apartments are a direct response to the present culture, the escalating urbanization, and the climatic conditions for the region. They pay, they pay homage to the vernacular architecture that once stood on the site before the development in a number of ways. The Kanchenjunga Apartments are a direct response. Oh, it has been copied 2 times, sorry. Korea pushed his capacity for ingenious cellular planning to the limit, as is evident from the interlock of 4 different apartment typologies, varying from 3 to 6 bedrooms each. Smaller displacements of levels were critical in this work, in that they differentiated between the external earth-filled terraces and the internal elevated living volumes. These subtle shifts enable Korea to effectively shield these high-rise units from the effects of both the sun and monsoon rains. This was largely achieved by providing the tower with relatively deep garden verandas suspended in the air. So one of the biggest, uh, one of the most important and one of the most famous feature of Kanchenjunga apartment was the huge terraces that this apartment had. uh, Almost 2 story. Usually these terraces were 2 storied, and they were created very deeply, and they were inspired from the verandas, and they were deep terraces which protected the interior spaces of the apartments from from monsoon and from harsh sun. The building is a 32-story reinforced concrete structure with 6.3-meter cantilevered open terraces. The central core is composed of lifts and provides the main structural element for resisting lateral loads. The central core was constructed ahead of the main structure by slip methods of construction. This technique was used for the first time in India for a multi-story building. The concrete construction and large areas of white panels bears a strong resemblance to modern apartment buildings in the West, perhaps due to Korea's Western education. However, the garden terraces of the Kanchenjunga apartment are actually a modern interpretation of a feature of traditional Indian bungalow, the veranda. And if you can see this image, this is plan 1 and plan 2 in a section of one of the apartments A. You can see how the level of the yellow shows the daylight. So you can see that all the places get daylight, but uh, space, but it is not very harsh. It's all getting diffuse daylight from smaller openings, and the terraces, big terraces, are given uh, inspired by the verandas of Indian bungalows to cut the harsh sunlight. So Charles Correa applied the bungalow principles. So the answer is Kanchenjunga Apartments, Mumbai. Last question for today. After this question, if you have any kind of doubts, you can ask me. I would try to answer your doubts as per my capacity and knowledge. In case I fail to answer any question, or if I'm not sure about the answer that I'm going to give, I would read on it, I would research on it, and I would give the answers in the next class. So after this last question, you can ask your questions and you can write it in the chat box. I would read your questions and I would try to answer your questions to my best capacity. Just 1 second, excuse me. The composition of Sangat is based on this vault: barrel vault, groin vault, rib vault, or fan vault. So Sangat, what is Sangat? Sangat is an office. Sangat was actually B.B. Doshi's own office studio. He designed it himself, Balkrishna Doshi, in the year 1981. It Sangat features a series of sunken vaults, sheathed in china mosaic, as well as small grassy terraced amphitheater and flowing water channels. Having been considered the building that fully describes himself, Sangat is a complete combination of Doshi's architectural themes from his previous work, including complex interior structures, ambiguous edges, vaults, and terraces. Uh, this is the some more description about the design of Sangat. There are lots of paths, and the paths turn and forces the occupant off of the north-south axis and alongside the elevated garden walls. Now visible in perspective, the vaults begin to recede into the background above the grassy amphitheater. Water channels and gardens in the foreground. As one passes by the reflecting ponds that capture the vaults in still water, the entrance is made apparent. It lies at the end of an angled approach to the walls. The underside of the vault in the main drafting room is finished with a textured concrete that dispersed natural light into the space. At the end of the hall lies the opening seen from the side entrance, and one regains their sense of place along the main axis. Now talking about the vaults, the barrel vault is the simplest form of vault. It is effectively a series of arches placed side by side, that is one by after another, and it forms a barrel roof. So barrel vault is a semicircular arch which is being kept one after the other, and the whole thing creates a hall with a semi-cylindrical roof on top. It is the simplest form of a vault. Excuse me. A groin vault or groined vault, uh, also sometimes known as double barrel vault or cross vault, is produced by the intersection at the right angle of two barrel vaults. So when two barrel vaults are intersected at right angles, so the shape that this intersection would create is actually a groin vault. The word groin refers to the edge between the intersecting vaults. A rib vault or ribbed vault is an architectural feature for covering a white space such as a church nave, composed of framework of crossed or diagonal arched ribs. So what happens in ribbed vault is that there is a vault and the vault is going, but there are some crossed or diagonal arches which are acting as ribs, and they create this feature in the rib vault. A fan vault is a form of vault used in the Gothic style, in which the ribs are all of the same curve and spaced equidistantly in a manner resembling a fan. So in a fan vault, it's a typical part of Gothic style, and the ribs in this vault are of the same curve and they are spaced equidistantly, and they resemble the shape of a fan. For example, I will showing the images here again. So this is how a barrel vault looks like. It's a semicircular arch which is being stretched out, and that creates a barrel vault. And then the groin vault is two barrel vaults which have been intersected at right angles, and that's how the shape of the groin vault comes. It is from the intersection of two barrel vaults, and this shape is achieved. And then ribbed vault, you can see it has different arches are used, and their ribs can be seen over in there. And then the fan vault, you can see the panel has a very rib kind of shape like a fan. So our answer is that the composition of Samgat is based on barrel vault, because if you go through these images, you see these are typical barrel vaults. So yeah, that's it for today. And if you have any doubts or any questions, please ask away. I'll stay in call for 20-25 minutes. If anybody has any questions, they can please come and ask. Since nobody is asking any questions, I would end the meeting now. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. We will continue it in the next session.